Welcome back to The Bulwark Goes to Hollywood. My name is Sonny Bunch. I'm culture editor at The Bulwark. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by Kara Cusimano, who is the festival director and VP of programming at the Tribeca Festival. I am extremely excited to talk to Kara about this year's festival, just in terms of the programming, what they've got coming up, but also to discuss festivals as places that people go to, Kara, because over the last couple of years here, we had a pandemic. There was a lot of trouble getting people in one place for good reason. And that has had weird consequences for film festivals in particular, which have done a good job, I think, of trying to work around that, but also are now, I think, maybe trying to move back towards festivals taking place in a discrete place where people can come and gather and enjoy movies, music, everything else. Kara, thanks for being on the show, first of all.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about the festival as a thing that people go to, because I've always loved Tribeca as an idea. Tribeca being this film festival at the beginning that tried to get people back to downtown New York after 9/11. It's a devastated economy. Film festival comes back, gets people in, going to restaurants, going to movies, that sort of thing. And that's an important part of the story here of the festival.
Yes. When you're talking about festivals as a thing that physically happens in a specific place in person, that is very much a part of our founding mission. The post 9/11 moment when the businesses downtown were struggling, people were not really coming back. Creating the festival as a place for community and to really have a healing purpose around film. That's the reason the festival came to be. And it stayed with us, I think, in our DNA, even when that felt less sort of specifically urgent. And then it became urgent again, around the COVID era. And I feel like we were uniquely positioned in that moment because we were not only the festival that did this once before, that kind of had a festival in a moment of crisis when the community really did need to come together, but we're also the kind of innovation festival. And when we couldn't come together, how do you have a festival anyway? Is it online? Is it outside? We did all of these things. So I think that has continued to be a really core purpose to what it is that we do over the last 20 plus years.
As the festival director and as somebody who, works on programming these things, how does the inability to gather in a place change how you program, what you decide to show, what sort of events you can put on? I imagine that just logistically, it's kind of a nightmare.
Well, it was interesting because, if you're thinking about the kind of COVID years, 2020, it was March 2020 that everything shut down. At that point, we had announced our program. We were weeks away from having a festival. So we had to make something new really quickly. It was approaching films that were already in the festival about doing something online. It was giving our awards. It was, there was a very practical angle of like, what can we do immediately? And then we had a whole year to plan. And then it was 2021 and things were still shut down. But we did have an in-person festival that year. I think we were the first in North America, if not one of the first. And we did it all outdoors. So that was the solution, was what is the safe way? So a lot of the planning was very logistical, very how do we just change what the physical experience is in order to make it safe. And then in parallel, we did the online festival too. So there were films that screened both in person and online. There were films that were just online. And yeah, I was thinking about a different audience. It's not only the kind of local community and the New Yorkers that we know very well, but now we're talking about nationwide and people wanting to participate in what's a movie that plays well when you're home and watching a Q&A virtually. And is that different than what plays well when you're in person at a premiere? So these are all questions we were kind of asking ourselves and answering in real time.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but were there any specific movies or events that you were like, well, this is going to be much better virtually than some other things might be virtually. Was there what specifically were you kind of looking at and thinking about in that regard?
Well, when we're programming the in-person festival, we do so much live beyond just the screenings. There's, at bare minimum, there's an introduction, there's a Q&A, the filmmaker is there to kind of share in the excitement and the experience and talk directly to the audience. But a lot of our events are also featuring live music performances. I think we have 10, 12 different full concerts at the festival this year that are paired with films about the subject, Indigo Girls or Gloria Gaynor, French Montana. They're all coming and playing. So those films, benefit from having that live kind of coming off the screen at you experience, which has been so much a part of what we think makes Tribeca really exciting. So looking at online, you're sort of in a way liberated from that. It's just the film, we can do a virtual Q&A, but really it's like, what do people want to watch at home? And they're probably watching it communally, with their family or with a partner. So films that kind of play well in that space, and things, that we do think have a big, like a sort of nationwide appeal. Sometimes there's things that play really well in New York because they're about a great New Yorker. We've got a doc about Stan Lee, and last year we opened with Jennifer Lopez. Obviously, those are big name folks that play to the whole country, but they made particular sense to do something to celebrate in New York City. And when we looked at an online festival, we were thinking that that much larger. What do people across the country kind of want to see and experience?
On the online front, I'm kind of fascinated by the COVID era move to online, because part of the whole appeal of a festival is a sense of exclusivity. Like you're seeing these things and you're joining other film lovers and coming together, and you're getting the first look at whatever, something new. And the online experience both broadens that in terms of making it available to more people, but also does kind of dilute the idea of exclusivity. We're doing this kind of special thing, for lack of a better word. And I'm curious how the filmmakers themselves think about this. When you're talking to them and say, hey, we want to put this online, are they like, yeah, that's great? Or are they like, well, maybe we want to be just in person? And also just in terms of distribution, I mean, there's all sorts of questions about, I guess my big question here is, do you limit it? Do you say, well, we're only going to sell 1,000 online viewings for this movie? We can sell 2,000 for this movie. Do you have to do that in partnership with the studios? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, your question, exclusivity is interesting because I think we've had to ask some really hard questions. A double-edged sword of like, there's an excitement to that, and there's people like sort of being in the room when other people can't be in the room, the celebrity element. But who are you excluding? And the accessibility of the online festival to people who could not be a part of Tribeca in the past, or felt like maybe they weren't our audience, was really powerful. And I think that's something we don't want to lose now that we've broached that and kind of broadened who the festival can be available to. So how do you create the energy of what what I think you're alluding to when you say exclusivity is also just a sort of energy in the room. And that's what the filmmakers want too, is that feeling of excitement, that sort of it's never been seen before, that premiere energy that can then hopefully kind of snowball into a acquisition for their film, great reviews, the sort of palpable experience of seeing a premiere for the first time. So emulating that experience online is I think a big question still. That's something that festivals are still trying to achieve, and certainly creating an online screening that looks as much like an in-person screening as possible has been a big part of how we've approached it with. So exactly that, you have only so many tickets available. It starts and stops at a certain time. There's an introduction and a Q&A like you would see in person. But I think that there's more to be done. There's more ways to create the community feeling and that excitement that that we've kind of refined and perfected over many years.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious from the business perspective on the studios and the distributors. Do they when you approach them and say, "Hey, we'd like to show this," how do they ensure that it is not, I don't know, immediately available to everyone? I guess I'm asking a piracy question here. How do you guys stop help try to combat the threat of piracy, which remains ever present and looming and annoying?
Yes, there are a lot of security protocols. We partner with a platform that has a lot of those implemented. So there's geo targeting, there's view caps, there's watch windows, there's like a blackout feature. So if you try to screen mirror, it won't have that effect. There's forensic watermarking, which was something I'd never heard of in 2019, but now I'm kind of intimately acquainted with. So there's been a lot of innovations on the security front as well to address exactly that concern. Because early on, like when it first became an idea, when it first became clear that this was the only way we were going to be able to do anything in the earliest days, I think people's first reaction was no. Like there was such a baked in kind of fear of being online that it took a minute for filmmakers and the industry as a whole to kind of come around to it. And then you saw a period of time where there was Tribeca, there was Sundance, there was Toronto. All these big festivals were offering huge chunks or all of their programs available online. And I think now it's kind of come back a little too, where there's less of an appetite and more or at least a more of a foregrounding of the in-person premiere, with the online kind of being, let's think about this as the second, third P&I screening type situation. So it's all kind of calibrating itself over time.
Yeah. This is a thing I don't know, and I making a bad lawyer mistake here by asking a question I don't know the answer to. But have there been any like big festival style leaks? I mean, I feel like this would have been much bigger news, at least in my world. I would have seen something about this if these premieres were getting like splashed all over BitTorrents everywhere. But I feel like that hasn't really been the case.
Not that I have heard. I mean, there's no big example I can think of some huge festival premiere that was suddenly available all over the internet. Maybe if you're deep into the internets, you could find something somewhere, but I can't think of a sort of scandal.
Yeah, I haven't either, which I find kind of surprising, just because of how much everybody worries about this sort of stuff. Let's talk about this year's festival. So it was either last year or the year before that, you guys changed the name from Tribeca Film Festival to Tribeca Festival, which is interesting. What was the impetus there?
Over the years, we've grown so much in the kinds of programming that we do. And I think even from the earliest days, we talked about ourselves as a storytelling festival and had that as kind of the guiding principle, that it's not just film. We were one of the first festivals to do TV. I think we were the first festival to do immersive kind of VR programming. We've now added podcasts, talks, branded content. So we just felt like it was a more representative name of what the scope of the program really was. I think film remains the bedrock. We're showing the same number of features, if not more, than we always have. But there's just so much else too, and it felt appropriate to be inclusive of them, those projects in the name.
There's one in particular I want to get to in a second, but you had mentioned concerts. You guys have a really good concert lineup this year. It's kind of crazy. What are some of the highlights? What should people show up for if they can still get tickets?
Yeah, we've got a couple big ones that we're doing as galas at the Beacon Theater. We have a film called Let the Canary Sing that's about Cyndi Lauper, and she's going to perform after that. And then we have a film called For Khadijah, which is about French Montana, another New Yorker. He grew up here and it's really, Khadijah is his mother's name. It's really kind of a tribute to his single mom raising him in New York City, which is a really kind of fresh approach to a biographical music doc that I appreciated. And he is going to do a conversation and a performance after that screening. And then our last night at the Beacon, we have Carlos Santana performing what is shaping up to be a pretty epic show after his documentary as well. So Those are kind of the big gala performances, and then we have this section called Spotlight Plus, where the plus is kind of what happens after the movie. And almost all of those are live music. We'll have Indigo Girls, Gloria Gaynor, Mark Ribier. We have a dance hall documentary. We have the live Broadway show of Waitress, which was recorded sort of Hamilton style, and Sarah Bareilles will be doing a performance after that one. Gogol Bordello will be here, and Alicia Keys. So it's a pretty
That's stacked.
Yeah, amazing music program in addition to and all of those are paired with films too. So all of it is kind of inspired by the films themselves.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, that it is like a film festival, music festival, Bonnaroo, whatever. We got all sorts of stuff here. All right. The thing that jumped out at me, and I'm really curious to hear more from you about, because I haven't seen it at a festival like this before. Games.
Mm-hmm.
Games. How do you program a gaming installment into a festival like this? Because I'm kind of fascinated what it will actually look like. Just, are we talking panels? Are we talking previews? Are we talking are people going to be doing speed runs? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, I mean, we came at it the same way we come to every new edition of the festival, which is this is storytelling, and this is a sort of creative storytelling medium with a huge audience and really incredible creators. And there's a space in the festival world to kind of be showcasing their work. And so it really does mirror the film program, the TV program, the immersive programs, in that there's a competition with official selections. People submit. We have games programmers who play all of the submissions and kind of make those final selections. So the jury will award prizes, and then you can actually experience some of these games at the festival. So there's the competition, which are like independently created and premiering at the festival the way a film would. And then there's the kind of what would be the equivalent in the film space of like our spotlight or our tentpole films, where there's kind of anticipated major releases, and they'll come and they'll do a panel, they'll maybe premiere some content, or they'll do a conversation about it, and those kind of tentpole moments exist integrated throughout the festival as well.
Can I ask what some of the tentpole games are this year?
Well, I know that we have an incredible event that I'm excited for with Hideo Kojima coming. And this is actually a documentary, so I'm cheating my answer a bit, but it's a documentary about him, and he's going to come and do a conversation afterwards, which is really exciting because I know his appearances are rare. We've been fortunate to have him at the festival in the past, but in terms of a creator who really is pushing the storytelling potential of the medium, we couldn't, be more excited to have him come and speak at the festival in the context of storytelling and film.
Yeah, I mean that's a big get. He's one of the greats. All right. So let's move on a little bit else here. TV. What is the state of TV at the festival? What are you guys looking at in terms of the prestige landscape? How is that shaping up?
Yeah, so TV has been with us for many, many years. We trace our TV lineage back to showing the series finale of Friends in I think like 2004 or whenever that happened. And it became its own section probably 6 or 7 years ago now. And we've been fortunate to have some premieres of incredible, major television. It was The Handmaid's Tale premiered with us, Chernobyl, last year The Bear world premiered at Tribeca. So we really saw, again, a space that a festival could serve to this audience and to the creators, because there's some TV festivals, but to be able to kind of offer that communal experience for something that most audiences are maybe used to watching at home or with their families was really well received by audiences and by the networks and the streamers, to have that opportunity to have their work recognized, be an official selection, kind of be curated and put on the same level as some of the feature films that we have. So this year's program, it's 10 events, and they're mostly new series that are premiering, some big stuff, the new Walking Dead spinoff, Dead City, which is set in New York. We have a doc series about Oscar de la Hoya called Golden Boy. We have Steven Soderbergh's new series with HBO, which has a really stacked cast. And then there's some kind of returning favorites. Probably the hottest ticket of the festival was the Outlander season 7 premiere, which sold out in, I think, a minute and a half or something like that. So we're expecting that one to be bonkers. So it really just shows how passionate these audiences are and how much they want an opportunity to engage with the cast and the creators and each other at in a festival style sort of presentation.
I every year I talk to the programmer at Paley Fest, and I'm always fascinated by the fandoms that show up for these TV style shows, and the fact that the hottest ticket at Tribeca this year is for Outlander makes me like fills me with joy in a weird way. I kind of love that. I love that obsessive energy there. It's shocking. A minute and a half. That's crazy.
It was, and people were angry. So if we could make more seats, we would, because I love to see it. And we have the whole cast coming out for it, so it should be bonkers.
That's great. You mentioned the new Steven Soderbergh show that you guys are going to be, but you also have a Tribeca talk with David Fincher, right? David Fincher and Steven Soderbergh, which sounds. I can't imagine two more interesting directors talking to each other. That is great. Tell me a little bit about the Tribeca talks, because that is always one of the highlights of the festival. Just you get titans of entertainment and great artists kind of talking to each other about their art, which I find a much more useful thing than having a schlub like me talk to somebody about their art. You get folks who actually know the intricacies and the difficulties of the artistic, creative experience, explaining it to folks.
Yeah, it really came from, wanting to do talks in a different way than maybe anyone else is doing talks. You see a lot of panels and or conversations with someone who's, doing the circuit and promoting a project. But we were like, what if we start with picking the people? And, they're really there to have a conversation about their careers and about their industry, and let's pair them with someone unexpected or someone that they chose. We go back to David Fincher says yes, and we say, who do you want to talk to? And sometimes they choose a friend, sometimes they choose someone they've never met before but admire, and really the most interesting conversations emerge from that, because we have Lin-Manuel Miranda with Rosie Perez. We have Paul McCartney with Conan O'Brien. We have John Mellencamp with David Letterman. I think any of these people alone would be fascinating to hear speak. But when you put them in conversation with each other, it really is these incredibly memorable, unique hours of conversation that we're really proud to host. And David Fincher has been one that I've been hoping to get for the festival for many years. So I will be there in the audience, because unlike the films, I go into the festival, I've seen all the films, but these talks, they only happen during those 10 days. And you really have to kind of be there to capture that.
How do I assume it depends on the pairing, and it changes from person to person, but how do they prepare for these? I mean, do you guys get them, do they trade emails? What is the actual process like for making a conversation that is both informative and interesting, and still feels kind of off the cuff?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the people involved and the extent to which they want us involved. We want to be supportive and we want it to be interesting as well. So it runs the gamut. We have fully prepped questions before and watched as that person read the questions that we prepared. But when you have David Letterman or you have Conan O'Brien, they are going to be prepared for the conversation. They're going to have their own process. So, we sort of allow the participants to dictate the process that they want to follow. And, sometimes it is more conversational. There are people who've known each other for many years and they get together and chat, and it's incredible. And sometimes it's much more kind of by the book.
Mm-hmm. Are these, I'm sorry, I don't actually know. I should know the answer to this. Are these going to be live streamed as well? Can people buy tickets to watch these online, or are these only going to be in person?
They're not live streamed. We do capture most of them and make them available later. Okay. Whether it sort of depends on which ones. Some will be kind of on our virtual platform. Some we turn into podcasts and release throughout the year. You can go back and listen to many previous Tribeca talks from over the years through our podcasts.
Okay, great. All right. What else? What else is going on at the festival that that folks should know about? I mean, those were all the things, the highlights I had kind of keyed in on. What else should folks be aware of that's happening at Tribeca?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple other new things we have going on this year. One is a section called Escape from Tribeca. That's part of our sort of lives within our midnight programming. And the idea behind this is that it's sort of all the films you wouldn't that wouldn't have been part of our midnight section before we created this. So it's supposed to be fun and wild and raucous and celebratory of kind of the late night crowd. So we have we're doing a special focus on Bruce Lee, which will include an Enter the Dragon anniversary screening and a bit of a reunion, a panel with some of the folks who originally made the film, a celebration of him. It's also the anniversary of his death, so we're going to do a live tribute. And there's a documentary as well called Enter the Clones of Bruce, which is about this era of Bruce Lee kind of tributes. They called them Bruce exploitation films.
Yeah.
That happened after his after Enter the Dragon, after his success. So that's a really fun, incredible, informative doc. We have a film within that called Final Cut that's from France. It's a zombie comedy that I think is really incredible. Also somehow miraculously a behind the scenes kind of making of backstage comedy. So I hope people kind of come out and discover that one. There's a couple other things in that section as well. And then also new this year, well, sort of an evolution is since the festival's been in June, which it's been over the last couple of years, we've been creating programming for Juneteenth. And we have kind of renamed this year Expressions of Black Freedom and created a focus on music, which we touched on some of the music programming in the festival already, but it's also the 50th anniversary of hip hop this year, which was born in New York. And so to kind of do something specifically around hip hop in New York City felt really appropriate, timely for us. We have a doc about Biz Markie called All Up in the Biz. We're screening Wild Style, and there's sort of programming throughout the festival that feeds into this as a festival-wide theme. So I think if that's interesting to anyone, they should come and check that out. So those are the kind of highlights of brand new stuff. But yeah, as you said, there's so much more in there. We have Elemental, the new Pixar movie, which I'm taking my kids to. So I really hope people kind of discover some of the family programming as well.
It's wild, just the amount of stuff at the festival. I'm like almost overwhelmed. I was almost overwhelmed looking at the schedule, trying to figure out what to focus on here. I did want to. You mentioned the Juneteenth programming. There are some interesting panels on diversity in film and inclusiveness and storytelling. One that jumped out, not actually about race, but was about disability and the portrayal of disability on screen. Could you talk about that just a little bit? I'm curious what that panel will look like and sound like.
Yeah, so we have panels throughout the festival that mostly take place in our spring studios, the hub of the festival, and we have some lounges in there. So all these talks that are, sort of state of the industry conversations are going to live in that space. And they definitely have a strong focus on diversity and inclusion and not just Tribeca, but really what's going on across the industry. And I think disability is maybe underrepresented when people have these conversations. And we wanted to be sure that we were speaking to that within the programming as well, whether that's, specific to Tribeca's programming and representation on screen or in terms of creators, but also in terms of audience accessibility. So these, like I mentioned before, I think these are questions that the pandemic has forced a lot of festivals to grapple with more than they ever have in the past. So that's been really meaningful, and what better space for us to kind of come together and have that conversation than at the festival and kind of see what the future could look like when we have all these incredible storytellers and thinkers and industry executives here in town for it.
What I guess one last question here. Since you mentioned the grappling with kind of how these festivals work, do you think there is a kind of movement back toward I don't know, a reaction against the digitalization of festivals? I mean, do you think you guys seem to be pretty open with, like, we're just going to do online, we're going to do in person, we're going to do it all. But I get the sense that for some other festivals, there's more like, well, we're not going to do as much of the online stuff. We want people here at the festival. Do you see a little bit of retrenchment in other places?
Yeah, I think there is sort of a movement the other direction. But I think it's important to kind of continue thinking about it, because who are we leaving behind when we say, oh, we're not doing it online anymore? It's too important to be in person, which I think sounds great and feels right when you're someone used to experiencing festivals in person. But I think that the huge groups of people that have traditionally been excluded that were able to be a part of Tribeca and the whole festival community through these innovations, I think it's important to preserve that. So it may not look the way that it looks today, but I think the right answer is not to just go back to how it looked before. The right answer is to kind of come up with something together that works for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was pretty much everything I wanted to ask. I always like to close these interviews by asking if there's anything I should have asked. If there's anything you think folks should know about the Tribeca Festival in general, the state of film, whatever. I mean, I always like to know what I have not asked and should have.
Tickets on sale now. TribecaFilms.com. That's my closing statement for the next 2 weeks.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot then. You say, what is an event that still has tickets on sale that you think people should definitely check out? Go ahead.
Oh, it's Elemental. I'm so excited about this. The new Pixar movie. It's opening at the end of June. We have the New York premiere, and the filmmaker is going to be at the second screening. So we have 2 screenings of it. And, this is the one movie that I'm actually going to see at the festival because I can bring my kids. And it's really exciting to me in principle, too, that we're just doing more for families. And again, opening up the audience, like who has not been part of the festival before? And we haven't done a lot of family programming over the years. So I would really love to see a big, full, fun premiere for that at the festival.
It's interesting you mentioned that. As a parent of 2 small children who likes to take them to the theaters, it definitely is not something that has ever occurred to me to be like, I'm going to take my kids to Sundance or Tribeca. But I do feel like that's an underexplored space in terms of, programming for a festival. How do you, this gets to another of my long running issues with the industry and kind of the move to take things online. But I don't know how you can raise the next generation of film goer without including them in events like this.
Yeah, that's my thing as well. I mean, I'm choosing to raise 2 small kids in New York because we can take them to the Museum of Natural History and the Guggenheim and the Bronx Zoo. You have these incredible resources for families by living in New York, and I would like Tribeca to be a part of that. It's not just Elemental. We have an animated film from China called Deep Sea that's in 3D. It's some of the most incredible animation I've ever seen, and sort of a Miyazaki-esque story, maybe for slightly older kids with subtitles. We're doing a free screening of Shark Tale. We're showing Planet B-Boy and doing a breakdancing tutorial. We really are trying to do a lot of programming for all audiences because it's part of the same story we're telling. It's not just about film. Embracing TV and games and immersive is also about reaching new audiences and kind of designing what the future of visual storytelling is going to look like. So bringing the next generation into that is a big part of maintaining that culture.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's great. That is great to hear. I love to hear that. All right, Kara, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And again, tickets on sale at tribecafilm.com. You can get all the stuff we talked about here, or I guess some of it. No Outlander tickets, but everything else
you cannot get Outlander.
most of the other stuff is still you can still get tickets for. So check that out, tribecafilm.com. I'm Sunny Bunch. I'm culture editor at The Bulwark, and I will be back next week with another episode of The Bulwark Goes to Hollywood. We'll see you guys then.
Movies, TV shows, books, podcasts, and more. It's What Women Binge with Melissa Joan Hart and her friend Amanda Lee.
If I'm going to be an actress one day, which I don't think I will, I want to be on
You want to be?
Doesn't everybody want to be at some point?
I don't know. Really?
Says the girl who's done it her whole life. But I would want to be on one of those shows where you get to keep the wardrobe.
Well, you have to steal the wardrobe. Let's be clear about this. Advantage of my Motorola's and my free Disney entrance and tour guides. Those were my perky things.
What Women Binge, wherever you listen.
The Bulwark podcast focuses on political analysis and reporting without partisan loyalties.
Real sense of deja vu sprinkled on our PTSD. So things are going well, I guess.
Every Monday through Friday, Charlie Sykes speaks with guests about the latest stories from inside Washington and around the world.
You document in a very compelling way all of the positive things that have come out of this, but it also feels like we have this massive hangover.
No shouting or grandstanding. Principles over partisanship. The Bulwark Podcast, wherever you listen.